Well, 'tis the season, so we thought we'd check in with our old friend from TSN, Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing? You keeping Ray in
Yeah,
line this year on the pod?
I'm trying my best. No, Ray has done a good job of just keeping nice and mellow. Like mellow Ray is a real good Ray. So Ray and
Mellow.
Dregs has had a lot of that throughout the course of season 5. I'm looking forward to the trade deadline on Friday because I've gone through a stretch here, guys. Like we all get the flu and colds and all of that. I got buckled last week. I unfortunately had to go out west, spent a bit of time in Manitoba. A family friend passed away, and I came back. Both my wife and I came back from that trip and just got hit by a ton of bricks. So as we're having this conversation here on Wednesday, I'm actually feeling like I'm about 80%, which is good with the deadline looming. Monday, it was looking sketchy for Friday's trade deadline, but I think we'll be able to bounce and be
Well, you got 48 hours to get well and be
Yeah.
a part of James Duthie and his traveling circus. We look forward to it every year. Dregs, as we sit here and chat, Mantha 50% retained for a second and a fourth. Tarasenko 50% retained for a third and fourth. Boy, it looks like a buyer's market is shaping up here a little bit.
It does. Yeah. And then, you look at some of the deals we've already seen prior to these deals where you bring in a third party team as a broker. So it just goes to show you how creative managers can be, but how creative they have to be in a real tight salary cap environment where obviously, the Florida Panthers acquiring Vladimir Tarasenko here are looking for more scoring punch. It seems like they've got an abundance of that with the season that Reinhart has had and the depth they have with Barkov and Kachuk. And go down the list, right? Carter Verhaeghe is terrific. So to add another line of offense with Vladimir Tarasenko, who's going to feel right at home. My understanding is his wife and his family live in Sunrise. So this is like leaving Ottawa, going home for Tarasenko. And Ottawa gets, 2 decent draft picks. They primarily get the third, but they also get a conditional fourth, which could turn into a third if the Florida Panthers go as deep again as they did last year. And given the quality of the Florida Panthers and how well they played this season, I don't know if there's a safer bet in the Eastern Conference to go deep into the playoffs than the Florida Panthers. So this makes them better.
The juicy part here in Vancouver is Elias Lindholm and whether after just 15 games, the Vancouver Canucks are willing to move on, no longer see him as a fit. What do you know? What do you think the chances are that Lindholm goes out and that Jake Guentzel comes in to Vancouver?
Yeah. Well, look, that was the speculation on Tuesday, right? And it was salacious. This is the kind of stuff that we in the media just feed off of, right? Just the idea of a coveted piece in Jake Guentzel of the Pittsburgh Penguins being involved in a 3-way trade with the Boston Bruins and the Vancouver Canucks. Come on, we could chew on that for days. Do I know that there were conversations? Yes, I do. How do you make a complicated dynamic like that work? We could see how Jake Guentzel would fit into the plans of Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks. We certainly could see why the Boston Bruins would want to try and make a hockey trade to acquire Lindholm, because the reality in Boston is they don't need one center. They need at least 2 centers there. Otherwise you wonder whether or not, the season goes up in smoke for the Boston Bruins. So the pieces did kind of align, but then you have to wonder, okay, what does Pittsburgh get out of this? Where are they getting a first-round draft pick from? There was speculation. Could it be Jake DeBrusk? Is it Podkolzin? Is it Höglander? Like, go down the list of all the pieces that could be in play. I think, there's some substance to all of that. So I'm not saying that maybe we jumped the gun here a little bit collectively in media. There definitely was a connection. And furthermore to that, in following up on it, I heard that the New York Rangers may be poking around the Vancouver Canucks on Lindholm, because they like the idea of adding a centerpiece as well. But I've also heard a little bit of the flip side, which involves both Vancouver and Vegas, and saying that, okay, of course they have interest in Jake Guentzel. Why wouldn't you? You're talking about a defending Stanley Cup champion, and you're talking about one of the top contending teams for the Stanley Cup in Vancouver. But is it more of the Pittsburgh Penguins trying to drum up a market as opposed to teams like Vancouver and Vegas being in hot pursuit? And there's a distinct difference there. Both those teams absolutely would love to have Guentzel. And you look at the history of Rutherford and Alvin and Jake Guentzel in Pittsburgh and all that. Yeah, we can connect the dots. But there's a big difference between one team being in hot pursuit as a buyer and the seller being in, you know, a situation where Kyle Dubas is trying to drum up a better market than the one that he actually has.
We know Frank Corrado's got opinions on this. Your thoughts on the Canucks now just needing to make this deal because it's out there? Like, is there damage control with Lindholm?
Not if he plays better, or, you know, you drift by the trade deadline and he settles in and he becomes the piece that they thought he was going to be when they made the deal, right? And you guys tell me, I mean, I've watched my share of Canucks games since that trade was made. I wouldn't suggest that he's been bad. He just doesn't seem to be a fit, no matter where Rick Tocchet plays him. And now you're starting to get, you know, the quarterbacks out there, the armchair quarterbacks, who are looking at the deal and going, geez, you know, not only is he not quite a fit, but he's starting to look a little slow. I mean, that's kind of what we do. And maybe that's what we see. I don't know. But it's, you know, somebody told me a long time ago when I used to watch my son play hockey, you know who it was? It was Craig McTavish. He said, Dregs, I'm going to do you a favor. When you watch your son on the ice, don't watch just your son. Watch the entire line, because what you'll notice is everybody makes mistakes.
Yes.
And so maybe that's what's going on now with Lindholm because of all of the speculation. But do I know that they've engaged in trade conversations with other clubs on Lindholm? Yes. And do I also know the history of Jimmy Rutherford, where I don't know that he would categorize this as a mistake. But why wouldn't you try and address an area of maybe potential concern? You know, you swung for the fence, you acquired Lindholm. Okay, he doesn't appear to be the fit you were hoping he would be. Well, you still have time to shake things up and make the change so that you're happy and they're happy. I don't see anything wrong with it.
The cupboard wasn't full.
He's got a reputation for getting off a player when he knows it's not working, which is different than a lot of general managers out there, Darren, who feel that they're invested after they make the move.
But what's the pressure, Darren, of making sure you don't end up with less in your pocket than you started with? It's one thing to make that trade if it's a saw-off and you get all your money back, you know, but can you get all your money back if you're Rutherford and Alvin?
No, probably not. But the saw-off comes in, okay, you can't miss twice, right? So if you're moving out Lindholm or you're making another deal and it's Guentzel, if Jake Guentzel ends up being a Vancouver Canuck, forget this conversation ever happened, because he's the best available player, right? Yep. He's the best available player, super competitive, terrific hockey smarts. We could go on and on and on. If they end up with another player that makes them more competitive, maybe doesn't have the flash and dash of a Jake Guentzel, but still makes them deeper and stronger and more competitive, okay, it's still good. Nothing wrong with that. If nothing happens of substance and they hold on to Lindholm, and Lindholm just walks into free agency and never really finds his way with the Vancouver Canucks, then that's more of a challenge. Because part of the reason why Vancouver paid what they paid to the Calgary Flames was because of where we're at right now. They wanted the early look. They wanted to get Lindholm in early to get him established, to make sure the fit was there. Well, right now it doesn't look like the fit was there, which is why they're having these other conversations. But maybe they can replace him with somebody else that is more suited to play the way the Vancouver Canucks need him to play.
Who else are you hearing the Canucks connected to?
Oh, it's a good question. I still think they're looking at the defense market too, right? I think this is Patrick Allvin and Jimmy Rutherford. Just, you know, what's the best available player? And okay, if it's Guentzel, all right, obviously that's where our focus is going to be. Beyond the forwards who we've already talked about, and if Guentzel doesn't end up in Vancouver, I think it drops off. I really do. You know, the New Jersey Devils at some point here in the near future are going to have to declare their intentions with Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli would be another good piece, but a team that I know has interest in Tyler Toffoli shared with me this morning, they don't think he's going anywhere. They think that, you know, this is Tom Fitzgerald just making sure that he's got all bases covered. that he wants to extend Tyler Toffoli. We know he's had contract extension talks with Pat Brisson. We believe that they're haggling over term more than anything else. So now where do you go below that, right? So I honestly don't have a real strong connection with the next forward for the Vancouver Canucks on that list, because there's a number of players who we don't even know about yet, right? I mean, you can't just look at the trade bait graphics that every network and every website has and says, okay, well, those are the players in play. Yeah, those are the players in play. But in the next 24, 48 hours, we're going to learn of names that we haven't even speculated on yet. And players are going to be available. Like a Pavel Buchnevich, okay, his name has been out there for an extended period of time. Again, as of this morning, the agent doesn't think he's being traded. And, you know, the source with the St. Louis Blues doesn't think he's likely going to be traded. But a lot can change between now and the 3 Eastern deadline on Friday.
Matt's pet project has been David Savard. What's the likelihood of him shaking free in Montreal? Because they do like him.
Yeah, they like him a lot. So as we speak, I'm going to say unlikely. But because of the buzz around David Savard, I'm at least willing to straddle the fence on this one. And why wouldn't you like him? You know, the pedigree, still plays the game at a high level, oozes character. I mean, there's just so much to like about the game. And, you know, David Savard is a defenseman that can play lower in your pairings, or if you need him to play in your top 4, top 3, he's capable of playing that too, right? But what does that cost? So you're talking about an individual who's valued by the Montreal Canadiens. Guys, the Montreal Canadiens aren't in the business of a never-ending rebuild. No, they're in the business of getting better right now so that they're nipping at the edges, or they're locked into an Eastern Conference playoff spot next season. Because otherwise, in a Canadian market, as we all know, guess what happens? The fan base says, enough of this nonsense. So they're going to have to get a crazy return.
John Shannon mentioned to us yesterday he thought Pat Verbeek and Anaheim are ready to go, make all sorts of trades, and that Frank Vatrano may be one of them. Of course, Verbeek has already swung maybe the biggest trade of the season with the Gauthier. Yeah. Who's the defenseman?
Drysdale. Yeah.
Drysdale, of course.
Drysdale, yeah.
What do you think on Vatrano here?
Skeptical at best. I mean, the information we continue to get out of Anaheim and from the player agent is that the preference is to keep him and to extend him. But until that happens, again, you know, you got to wait for that phone call to happen. So I'm not besmirching any information that suggests that he could be traded. There's a ton of interest in Frankie Vatrano. There really, truly is. So maybe they get to a place where Verbeek just says, okay, enough. You know, I've gone back and forth with the player agent here. We're not making any progress. I'm not messing around anymore. And he calls the bluff. Adam Henrique is likely going to be traded. I keep seeing and hearing that, you know, the Edmonton Oilers believe that, you know, they're going to zero in on him. So I think that Verbeek is going to be active. I do. But for me, the jury is still very much out on Vatrano because, you know, again, as we've talked about here, Verbeek and the Anaheim Ducks are like a lot of clubs. Yeah, they're trying to go through a process, but they're not in the business of making other teams better at their own expense. So when you've got good young players like Frankie Vatrano, who are really key to your room, to your bench, to how you play, Greg Cronin's a big fan. Again, it would take a ton, but if contract negotiations break down on Vatrano, maybe he does get tossed out there.
Are the Ducks the most likely to really have a fire sale and burn everything to the ground? Is there one team you think is more likely to do that, or are all of them just going to be 1 or 2 guys at most?
It feels like most of them, Blake, are going to be 1 or 2 guys. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's, you know, maybe because so many of the teams have already made their moves. Like, I'm a bit surprised that we haven't seen more from the San Jose Sharks. I mean,
they don't have much, right? Like,
no, they don't. You're right. They don't. But, you know, they've got some pieces like, you know, Kakinen, the goaltender. I mean, that goalie carousel is just wild that nothing really has moved there. And I guess it's gummed up because of Jacob Markstrom and because of some of the speculation that was earlier around UC Saros and more recently around Linus Ullmark of the Boston Bruins. But maybe that shapes into action here in the next several hours leading up to Friday. But honestly, beyond that, there's no real fire sales. There really aren't, because some of them have been slower and more methodical. I mean, watching Greg Conroy and the Calgary Flames, man, at a snail's pace that they're operating in has been just, it's been shocking, to be fair. I mean, Noah Hanifin is playing his best hockey, yet they continue to roll him out there. And we know he's going to be traded because he's not signing an extension in Calgary. So I don't, and then, now I flip over to the Philadelphia Flyers. Nikki Sealer is going to sign an extension there. So that takes one of their two coveted defensemen in play likely out of the market and leaves Sean Walker, who's probably going to be traded. So lots of, permutations all over the league, but, no multiplayer teams, I don't think.
I was going to say, Dregs, I think Calgary can qualify as a team that is going to move a piece or two, but that could still be considered fire sale, given who's already traded out there. So Hanifin for sure. What about Markstrom at this stage?
Yeah. Well, look, so much changes with a phone call. Like, we know that Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils have been consistently on Jacob Markstrom. The belief is Markstrom would be willing to waive to go to the New Jersey Devils. So here's my theory on this. Calgary, I think I can appreciate why, if you trade Markstrom, then you might as well move other pieces, not just Noah Hanifin, right? Because it's over. It doesn't matter what you do with the remaining games of the regular season. You're not going to find your way truly back into the playoff mix. And right now it feels like a long shot, and it seems like a dead end if you move Markstrom. I guess my theory would be, though, to play devil's advocate, what if you get to the offseason, now you have Markstrom. Markstrom says, okay, I want out. And here's my list of teams I'm willing to go to. And with my no-move clause, it's a team of one. That's the New Jersey Devils. Mm-hmm. So now you've got Tom Fitzgerald, who's coming back and saying, okay, well, instead of the package I was willing to give you leading up to March 8th, I'm going to give you 60 cents on the dollar. And here's what you're getting from Markstrom now. And, you can play that tough game, and there's no guarantee you'll win it. And maybe Conroy says, well, we own the player's rights. He's under contract. So if he doesn't show up, then we suspend him. All right. Yeah, I guess. But nobody ever wants to get involved in that nastiness. So I'm not closing the door on a Jacob Markstrom trade to the New Jersey Devils until 3:05 Eastern on Friday, when we know he's not being traded. And then I think some of the speculation just takes it to a new level as we brace for the offseason.
I feel sorry for Marky because they're no closer to the playoffs than the Flames are. What do you make of this? Is the league pissed off, do you think, that there are no playoff races to speak of? I mean, somebody's going to need to win 8 in a row that's below the bar. Never mind Nashville, who's above the bar. Somebody's going to need to win 8 in a row to put themselves close to the playoff bar in either conference. It's unbelievable. In the age of parity, there isn't much of it right now.
And it all just happened like in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, last week.
Yeah, it does take some of the spice out of it for sure. And I think that's also influenced the trade deadline in a big way, right? You know, again, like what was it, a week and a half ago, we were actually talking about the idea of UC Saros being traded by the Nashville Predators. And then you find out, one team told me, well, we called because we had interest in UC Saros, of course. And the response we got back from Barry Trotz was, okay, well, we want one of, if not your best young NHL forward. We want your top prospect, and we want a first-round draft pick, and that's kind of where we're getting started. And the team basically said, well, I guess you're not trading UC Saros then. And then they run off, 8 straight wins, and it's obvious they're not making that trade. So it definitely impacts a lot of things. Whether or not the commissioner's office is worried about it, I don't think so. They've got better things to worry about with, officiating now, front burner, and Department of Player Safety continuing to be front burner and things like that.
And that franchise that we shall never speak its name.
There's
Dregs.
that too.
Remember, we made that rule last year that you don't speak about that team unless absolutely nothing is going on. Lastly, what do you think of the first time we've talked to you here in a while?
Yeah.
What do you make of this Canucks season? What do you think of their chances in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, I think if you want to go back to last year, and I'm certainly not taking any credit for anything that Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff of the Vancouver Canucks have done, but I had a real good feeling when they hired Toc that this was going to turn around. Not to this degree, come on. I mean, But they've also gone through some adversity of late. So it's far been from a flawless season to this stage. But, the players talk about the standard, and that's exactly what I thought Tocchet would bring. And that's why I think management made the call on Bruce Boudreau when they made the call, because I think that paid dividends. So that Tocchet and company come in. He establishes that standard and that culture that they knew was going to be there when they arrived in training camp. So I'm less surprised at the success of the team overall.
Brilliant stuff. Great to hear your voice, to your face. Thank you for this. Get better. And we'll be watching with interest over the next 48 hours.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Good to check up again.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.